Frey, the layperson, the common person, approaches disease from a catch it point of view. You catch a cold, you catch AIDS, you catch mumps, you catch measles. Is that true, or is that also manufactured? And if it is manufactured, Dr. Frey, I want you to really explain it so that the person out there in the audience can understand what's behind that.
Okay, we're talking about contagion. Now, contagion exists for thousands of years, the concept of it. And originally it applied to demons. People were possessed of demons, and they had people who drove demons out as a profession. And eventually part became the priestcraft, and another part became the medical profession. But demonology was really the science of ancient times, and they believed that diseases were evil spirits and demons that possessed people. But the concept of disease evolved, but the idea that disease passed from person to person as demons or evil spirits or whatever continued to exist. And of course, when the medical system was commercialized, they kept and exploited old concepts. Now, contagion, of course, is a myth. There are many medical concepts that are outright myths that are perpetuated perpetually simply because they yield big profits to the cartel that controls the medical profession. Now, when it comes to contagion itself, if I were to line up 100 people and I gave each one an emetic and all 100 of them vomited, you'd say, Jesus, this vomiting is a very contagious disease. But the truth is, they've only demonstrated scientifically one thing: similar organisms subjected to similar influences react similarly. And to put it in very blunt terms, similar organisms indulging the same bad habits get the same bad results. So when it comes to diseases, the causes of it are rife. They're what is contagious. We're likely to pick up other people's bad habits and practice them. In this country, disease is rampant. It's the most diseased country in the world. And of course, we have more bad habits than any other country in the world. And most people are sick in some way or other. Over 50% of our peoples have a chronic disease.
I have a mother out here in the audience, excuse me, who says, I just moved to a new community, and my 6-year-old has been kept out of school 6 weeks because I have not been able to get to have her measles shot, and they won't let her in school. And you telling me that all I'm doing is taking my child to what?
Well, the child will not get the measles for that reason, for lack of a shot. The truth is that shots tend to devitalize a person such that any such vital action as measles, which is only a body eliminative activity, will not occur. However, measles is not the problem. They want to give you what they call DPT, and a whole series of shots, and they're compulsory, not really compulsory. If you don't have to keep your child out of school in the state of California, it's just a matter of conscience. It's whether you get your child vaccinated or not, and all you have to do is just send in a letter to your school superintendent or the school nurse saying that it's contrary to my beliefs that my child should be vaccinated, and they will exempt your child on that alone. In other states, they're not so fortunate.
Move to the larger issue for me for a moment, Dr. Frey. What is it then that causes the measles? How does the child catch the measles, or the mumps, or the whooping cough?
Measles is a simple disease whereby the body eliminates toxic materials through the skin. And all diseases are body efforts. They're initiated and conducted by the body to eliminate poisons that have become extraordinary to its ability to eliminate normally through the kidneys, the skin, the bowels, and the lungs.
No parent, excuse me, no parent would willingly feed his or her child, I mean, no caring parent would willingly feed his or her child poisons.
That's right.
What are these poisons? How are they getting into our children?
When it comes to poisoning, the first commandment of eating is thou shalt not poison thyself. But unfortunately, when Americans eat, they're eating a plethora of poisons every day. It is estimated that the average American poisons themselves between 10 and 60 times a day. We know every time you smoke a cigarette, you're poisoning yourself. Every time you take a cup of coffee, you know you're poisoning yourself. When you take alcohol, you know you're poisoning yourself. It's a very bad poison.
Well, is tea any different from coffee?
Well, tea is really the same as coffee. They have just different names for the same substance, which is a type of caffeine. But there are many other things with which we poison ourselves. I mean, soft drinks are rife with poisons like phosphoric acid and caffeine. And of course, in the case of Coca-Cola formulas, they have the coca leaves from which a derivative is made, and it's quite toxic. Gives you a big kick. I mean, we eat and everything for the kicks we can get out of it rather than for nourishment. And soft drinks are a disaster, just like alcohol and alcoholic beverages.
I've read that Coca-Cola, the secret ingredient in Coca-Cola as far back as 1906 was actually cocaine.
That's correct. It comes from the same leaf that cocaine is derived.
So if we bring this full cycle now to 1989, we have people who are dying of AIDS. We have very responsible people who know that their good friends have caught AIDS. We have a recent lawsuit where a person has been awarded $22 million because his health was impeded or endangered by a person who had a quote-unquote communicable disease that he did not reveal. Would you comment on that
okay,
for
we're
us?
talking about Rock Hudson.
Yes, yes.
And of course his homosexual partner.
Yes.
His homosexual partner doesn't have AIDS, incidentally.
Right.
He was just so-called exposed to it, and on that basis he won a jury award of the $22 million. In fact, just about everything Rock Hudson had left over in his estate. But the truth is that diseases aren't communicated. I repeat, diseases result from deficiencies or from toxic materials. When you have a deficiency, your body becomes poisoned anyway. Now, the reason that you have an immunodeficiency, that is a shortage of white blood cells in your blood, is because so many of them are destroyed in apprehending and ejecting toxic materials, especially from drugs like heroin, cocaine, poppers, uppers and downers, and things like this, which the gay crowd were so fond of, but which they're giving up pretty much now.
Are you saying, Dr. Frey, that if in fact Rock Hudson had AIDS, his lover, unless he were doing the same kinds of habits as Rock Hudson, was in no danger ever, never?
No danger. And the idea that a virus caused this is strictly, it's never been proven. In fact, if the proof means anything, it means it doesn't.
What exactly is a virus?
Well, a virus is an evil spirit, but I'll tell you what they've settled on it. Virus was already, in the last part of the last century, began to be referred to as a cause of disease because it was already evident that the bacterial theory of disease causation wouldn't fly, because there was Koch's postulates which said if an agency causes a disease, in the disease itself, that agent must always be present. And it all said that if that agent is caused the disease, its presence must always occasion the disease. Well, this is demonstrably false. For instance, in actual AIDS cases, people in the hospital and dying of it, less than 50% of them had the so-called AIDS virus, which is a weak form of a retrovirus. Anyway, they have found, they say, 1.5 million people in this country with the AIDS virus. That's the estimate.
Yes.
And they say they're living under Damocles' sword, and it's just a matter of when they get it and when they die. But the truth is, they don't have the virus. What they have is a so-called antibody to the virus. And if you remember, the rationale for getting vaccinated is so the body will create antibodies and you'll be immune to the disease for which you have the antibodies. Well, here they've done a switch in their rationale, and now having the antibodies means that you're subject to getting the disease. That's some flip-flop, if you will, but I mean, they don't think the American people are thinkers. They take them for suckers, and that's the way they've been.
I want to try to clarify a point.
Yes.
I have read in some of your literature, one of your books, that that a virus is really not alive but is dead. It is a dead substance, and a dead substance. Why don't you pursue that and
all right.
let us know exactly what a virus itself is and whether in fact it plays any part in disease.
Right. A virus, so-called, is always dead. There's no such thing as a live virus. Even the so-called live viruses means they were obtained from live tissue instead of dead tissue. But viruses, so-called, are actually genomes. Now, a genome is the genetic material. And if you look at a cell in your body, you have about 100 trillion of them. And each cell has a nucleus. And these nucleuses disintegrate when the cells disintegrate. There are lysosomes which dissolve the cell. And of course, they do not do a thorough job, and the actual nucleus of the cell is well protected. And in degenerating it, it may not completely destroy that nucleus, which is the genome for a cell. That is where the chromosomes, the genetic material, is housed. If it's not destroyed, it just floats in the system, and it's called a cytomegalovirus. But something that most people don't realize is each cell has from maybe 20, 30 to 40,000 mitochondria in it, each cell. A cell is a little walled-in city, and it has these residents there as independent forms of life, just like bacteria, an independent form. In fact, they're no larger than a bacterium. So when the cell is destroyed, these mitochondria also destroyed, and each mitochondrion has a genome. That's a control center. A genome is to a mitochondrion, or organelles, which they're called, what the brain is to the human body. It's a control mechanism. Okay. It has the blueprint whereby that mitochondrion creates our energy from glucose. It has the blueprint for making specialized proteins that the cell and even the body needs. These mitochondrions are really the basic unit of life. They have collected together, and they have a protected environment called a cell. And of course, cells have united together, and they have a protected environment called a body. But when the cells die, and we have maybe 300 to 500 billion cells dying every day and being replaced at the same rate as a rule, the dead cells disintegrate. When you figure it out, if there's, say, 500 billion cells a day dying, and each one has 20,000 shall we say, mitochondrion dying. Well, you have several quadrillion, maybe a quintillion of genomes that are involved. And if those that survive or don't get completely destroyed, they're dead, yes, but they just float around in the system. Now, there are processes called pinocytosis and phagocytosis, whereby cells recycle the body's own waste. The body's own waste are very subject to use. It's not an alien material, and all it does is the cell takes it in, it actually invaginates it, becomes a little dent in it, and then it envelops the material, and it forms an impromptu stomach, and lysosomes, again, go in and digest this material and break it down into the proteins, the amino acids, and the fats into simple fatty acids or monoglycerides and glycerols. And then the cell can use it. It reconstitutes it into its own materials. So what they're calling the genome is that material which floats around that came out of mitochondria, but they're calling them viruses. After all, the system is based on drugs, and it needs scapegoats in order to justify the system. They're sending the drugs in to destroy these so-called things. Never mind that the drugs destroy the human being more than they destroy anything else, and dead material don't have to be destroyed, it's already dead.
When you say the system now, are you talking about the body mechanism or about people?
When I'm talking about the system, I'm really talking about the medical system.
Okay, all right.
The cartel, which controls
okay.
it, right.
All right.
They need scapegoats. And when you have disease, they want you to use their representatives, which are called physicians and hospitals and clinics. They want you to go there and get treated because these people are trained drug peddlers. They don't realize it, but they are sophisticated in drug dispensing. They've been taught that. They're not taught about health in the medical schools. They're taught about dispensing drugs. The pharmaceutical houses, they need drug peddlers. And what they do is elevate trained medical men and women to a high station. They give them semi-divinity, and whatever they say goes, because they know that the medical profession will dispense their drugs that way. Now, you know about medical societies. If someone wants to go and get people healthy and not dispense drugs, they get kicked out, and they lose their license, because the system is set up to serve the drug industry and not to serve the people. I've had several MDs take our course, and I've had one in Idaho who started fasting people, giving them raw diets and more fruits, and for not dispensing drugs, he was kicked out of the society. Well, he kept on practicing, and they hauled him in for violating the Medical Practices Act. And the judge told him if he so much as prescribed a glass of water to anyone hereafter, he would be hauled into jail. So he can't even prescribe a glass of water for a dying man.
But now, Dr. Frey, that is a very serious charge.
Well, it's serious if you're into the racket and don't want to be shown up. But if for people who are out there listening to this who have no vested interest in medicine or pharmaceutical interest, hey, this should be very serious. It should be the best news they've had.
But how can you say to the person who wakes up every morning and cannot live without an aspirin, or the person whose closet is full of medications given by the family doctor, and the family doctor who's trusted himself, who writes the prescription, how can you convince my public out there that all of these people are in some sort of undeclared conspiracy to do them harm?
Oh, gosh, I'm surprised that our ancestors in nature ever made it at all. I'm surprised that people in tribes in Africa get along at all because, hey, they don't have any physicians, drugs, or anything. They live as foragers and hunters.
Well, you know, it did occur to me that there are no veterinarians out in the plains, are there?
That's correct, and the animals get along just fine, don't they? Healthy, never diseased and sick. And of course, when man takes over and dictates the diet of the animal, he gets sick, and they take him to a vet, and he makes him sicker.
That's a lot of food for thought.